We're going to talk about our profession and what it means and what toll it can take on us. So, I guess society in general, and we've heard about it more and more, and even this morning I hear about 98% of the EMTs are suffering, is becoming more and more aware of what our mental health is like. We've all experienced Bell's Let's Talk Canada and Healthy Minds Canada. And the question is, how much does your profession affect your mental health? What we do is different than a typical engineer or a typical scientist. We spend all of our day looking for problems. We spend all day, every day, looking for problems that you can't see. And it looks very closely to lawyers and auditors and dentists who are doing the same thing, spending all day looking for problems that you can't see. And they have much larger professional bodies, and they found that it does take a toll on their members over time. So we wanted to look at a typical day in the life of a CSAP, and Susan Burak's here from the Law Association, Lawyers Assistance Program in BC, and I'll give a little introduction first, and then she's going to take us through some of the things that they've done with the Lawyers Assistance Program. But we look at historical reports for past problems all the time. Then when we find one, we need to tell somebody the bad news. Nobody ever wants to hear they have a contaminated site, or they might have a contaminated site. Then we go and remediate the site, we put it all together, and then 1 in 7 of our reports, we look at, another 2 people look at them for mistakes in those reports in our famous performance assessment process, right? So we're always looking for problems and problems and problems, and then when Robin just talked about James Island, there was 3 experts and 3 tables right here who were all part of that process, who all had different opinions on what happened. So we're always all day, every day looking for problems. Like I said, 1 in 8 are audited by 2 peers. Everything goes through a detailed screening where we're looking for problems in our reports. Then, if we're very lucky, the MOE looks at our reports and they can always find something. And then occasionally we have a case where they're obligated by the regulation to notify their parent association. So, in summary, we're paid to be pessimistic. We're always looking for problems. We're paid to be paranoid, because we're always afraid somebody's going to look at something or we're going to miss something or something like that. And we're paid really to be survivors, because at the end of the day, no one's really ever happy that they spent $500,000 to clean up a site. Nobody's ever happy they spent $1 million to clean up a site. Even if you do it for half the price, no one's ever happy. So what we did about a year ago, we started looking at other organizations around the world and said, and around the world and then back to around Vancouver, and said, what are they doing? And although we've got Bell's Let's Talk and we've got Healthy Minds in Canada and a whole bunch of different initiatives, it's not really out there. And one of the primary pieces of research now is saying, if you're being pessimistic for a long period of time, it has serious effects on your mental health. So I can have the most gorgeous wife in the world, and if she's got a mole, all I see is the mole. And I won't see that she's the most gorgeous. And they said time and time again that that's what happens. If you have your kids and they're doing really, really well in school and you did excellent at the soccer game, you should have went this way for that goal. And they're finding over and over again what's happening with lawyers and auditors. And it manifests itself in depression, chemical addictions over time, gambling addictions, marital stress at home, a lot more divorces, and a lot of stress with your own kids. So what we want to be able to do today is Susan has agreed to come from the Lawyers Assistance Program at BC, and she's going to take us through one of the workbooks that they use. And what it is going to do is help us recognize where the stressors are in our lives and what we need to be able to do to be able to help ourselves the way through. The last thing that I'm going to say is I've spent a bit of time with Deloitte recently, and they take every single one of their new hires and bring them to Dallas to their campus, and they do courses on auditing, but one of the courses they do is on mental health. One of their senior partners in London just had to give up for a little while and take some time, take care of himself, and he decided when he came back he was going to change it for the whole organization, and they've got a couple 100,000 employees, and every single one spends half a day to protect their health as they go through their organization. We're not big enough to do that, but the Lawyers Association of BC, and Susan's here to be able to take us through a quick book. So we can all take out our books, and we can welcome Susan, and she'll bring us through. Susan's a lawyer. She's also a registered clinical counselor. Okay. There you go. There's the easy way.
Now, to move the slides, this down button.
Try.
Yeah.
Right, there it is. Yes.
Okay, there we go. Okay. It's nice to be here, and I'm so pleased to be able to share our materials with you. I'm from the Lawyers Assistance Program of British Columbia, and we have a program where we provide support for anybody who works in the legal industry, lawyers, judges, their families, and we're really pleased to be able to help by providing these materials. One of the problems that people in professions encounter, as has been outlined by Peter, is the contagion effect of having to be pessimistic. And so working with a constant high level of negativity bias can be very draining. And it can go as far, and I'll outline some of the detail, and given the short amount of time that we have for this subject, usually it's like a 3-hour workshop. So what we did is we put together the workbook for you, and then you can take this home and reflect upon it as well. We'll go through the workbook quite quickly. I believe we only have half an hour now till noon, so we'll kind of go through this material. It's a lot of material, but then you'll be able to take it home and, think about it, reread it, process it. So vicarious trauma, it's more than merely a stress or burnout reaction. It results from the cumulative stress, burnout, and compassion fatigue as a result of repetitive exposure to toxic situations and consistently negative situations. And it's become increasingly recognized as a cumulative process, and working professionals who have a inner mental connection, because we all connect with our work, and so when it's constantly bad news, we are at risk of developing vicarious trauma. So there's the contagion effect of negativity. And what happens, there's been a lot of research by the neuroscientists. There is one called Rick Hanson, Hanson. He's located in the University of Southern California. And his recent book, Hardwiring Happiness, really outlines how the mental processes of our cognitive function of our brain, it works so that negativity sticks in our awareness like Velcro, but the positive experiences wash off us like we're coated with Teflon. So we always remember the most negative, we always remember the most, we have this tendency to have a negativity bias. It kept us alive when we were all roaming the Serengeti. The people with a good negativity bias didn't get eaten by predators, So we have brought this forward through natural selection. So actually we're genetically predisposed to have more of an increasing negativity bias. So what happens, the common signs and symptoms of vicarious trauma? So it can include the following, and one or all of these. So this is not yet in your workbook, but we'll get to the workbook in about 2 minutes. So if you just think about, if you've experienced any one of these: social withdrawal, emotional lability, sort of anger, aggression about what's going on, about the negative impact, greater sensitivity to violence, somatic symptoms. So some people experience high levels of anxiety, panic attacks. Some people have trouble getting to sleep because they're so worried about what's going on. And then intrusive imagery, so imagery that kind of pops into your head like popcorn when you're trying to do something else. So it could lead to avoidance behaviors. It could also lead to procrastination. Being unusually cynical, just having your negativity bias is on, someone's taken the dial and just cranked it right up. So, and then not being able to set the usual healthy boundaries that you normally would set. And then a lot of relationship difficulties happen because people are very, very stressed out. And so it also comes along with so vicarious trauma can mimic post-traumatic stress disorder. And you can have emotional or physical exhaustion. And suddenly, people find themselves crying suddenly without any sort of pre-warning. Also, there's the tendency to isolate, to silo, and withdraw socially. A reluctance to discuss problems, and high stress levels and irritability. So preoccupation, avoidance, and hyperarousal, hypervigilance. So we're going to talk about the resilience and protective factors, training, preparation, coping style, creating a more manageable workload, understanding your current life context, and establishing a sense of control, because a lot of vicarious trauma is brought about that people feel that they have really lost control over the situation and what they're able to actually accomplish with the situation. So now we can get to our workbooks. And so what we've done is we've outlined sort of the how to actually address the situation of dealing with the experience of vicarious trauma. So establishing awareness, balance, and connection. And so being attuned to what the needs of the situation are, meeting the needs of the situation, and being self-aware about your ability to deal with the situation, and maintaining life balance, because what happens when people tend to be traumatized is that there's always this cognitive dissonance going on in their mind. So if you see the little cartoon on the front cover of your workbook, so part of me wants to help you with your crisis, Hargraves, but part of me wants to go for lunch, So people always feel pulled in two different directions, and that's sort of, so understanding that you've got to maintain life balance, And then connection to yourself, to others, and the world, Communication is the part of connection that breaks the silence of unacknowledged pain. And so that's one of the remedies and ways in which you can help yourself. So we look at the three realms of our lives: professional, organizational, personal, unique characteristics of individuals and their circumstances. So recognizing the burnout factor is really important. So just take a minute, okay, and look at page 2 of your workbook and just kind of go down the list here and see if any of these signs of burnout apply to your situation. So just take a minute, I'll time it. See how many you tick off as you look at that list. Thank you. Okay, how many people checked at least one? Okay. All right, so even by checking at least one of those boxes, you might be exhibiting some symptoms of burnout, you know. So how many checked 5? Okay. So, you know, we can see that, okay, we can see that, you know, there's a lot of sort of overburdening, and a lot of people are functioning in overdrive, right? So that's it's nice to kind of develop this level of self-awareness and to be able to step back and pace yourself a little more and do some more life balance. So what is burnout? Well, burnout is an unacknowledged state of exhaustion that occurs when you consistently make choices for the benefit of others at the expense of your own needs. Okay. So we're looking at the workbook on page 3 now. The slides are just the outline of what we're doing. So another definition of burnout is a state of fatigue or emotional depletion. So people feel burnt out, and they are also experiencing the exhaustion. So you've got the physical exhaustion happening as well as the emotional exhaustion. And it's really important to understand that because to drive yourself too much in overdrive, you know, then you're going to have to step back and, you know, have some restorative time and balance your life. So on page 4, we have about compassion fatigue. So compassion fatigue, and you'll see this in the literature, and it's almost like there's sort of a progression that happens. So first there's a level of burnout, which can flip into compassion fatigue, which can flip into vicarious trauma. And, you know, I'm not going to just read from this and bore you, but one of the key things about compassion fatigue is that if you let yourself stay in overdrive at that stage, it's going to flip into vicarious trauma. So if you want to just take a minute and on a scale of 1 to 10, kind of rate yourself. So where are you on that scale? Going from burnout to the full, if 10 is vicarious trauma and 1 and 2 are minimal levels of stress, you know, where are you on that scale? Okay, so you've just kind of checked in with yourself and you kind of know where you are. Okay, because if it's left untreated or unacknowledged, it often leads to destructive behaviors. Drinking, smoking to excess, engaging in self-injury, risk-taking behaviors. And so people find that their health will start to deteriorate. So by having that level of self-awareness, you can then move into creating healthy boundaries. So as set out on that slide there, you've got self-awareness, understanding your core values, and emotional self-care. So on page 5 of the workbook, we've got some information about setting healthy boundaries. And one of the reasons why people flip into burnout, they overwork, they overburden themselves, get into overdrive, is because they have not set those boundaries. So a boundary is a limit that promotes integrity. And by the limits you set, you protect your psychological and physical well-being. So it requires the ability to say, what? No, that's right. Okay, so how many of you are either the parent of a 2-year-old or a grandparent of a 2-year-old? Okay, there's a few people in the room. Okay. And so, this is the age where children start to identify more with the core of who they are, and they start to say, no. And no, you're not the boss of me, My children are grown, but I remember that. And as parents, we kind of had to struggle with that and learn that they are growing up and they're independent people. So they're setting boundaries. And so it's very important that when you understand that your core values are part of your boundary setting. So people who are clear find it easier. So if you're clear on your core values, then it's easier to make tough decisions because you kind of have a cognitive map of where you're going and what your intentions are. It's easier to set your intentions, and it's easier to be clear on what you're doing. So going on to page 6, we have work boundaries, with all our iPhones and bells and whistles and things that buzz in the night. Okay, we are never out of the office, right? And so you can look at the cartoon there on page 6, and it says, "It has come to our attention that you have a personal life." Okay, so the personal life is as important as your work life, and so balancing those two. So just take a minute now on page 6 at the bottom here, and what boundaries are you good at setting, and what are some areas where you think, okay, just take another minute and fill that out. It's on the bottom of page 6. Okay, has everyone kind of self-monitored themselves? So you've got some boundaries you're very good at setting, and you know about maybe 1 or 2 areas where you're going to work at it and set a boundary. So now moving to page 7 and 8, some more coping strategies. So self-care, body, mind, and soul. Okay, we are unique, creative individuals, and we are a whole person. So we have to pay attention to all aspects of what makes us a person. And so, the usual physical fitness, wellness, making sure that you make the time for exercise. I love that. If you don't take care of your body, where will you live? You've got the external environment that you're all working really hard to take care of. What about the inner environment? Okay, this is the body you live in. So self-care with physical exercise. And I don't know, how many people engage in some aspect of meditation here? Yeah? Okay. So they have found that it's one of the most extensively research-proven ways of creating inner peace is to meditate regularly. And that takes care of your heart and your soul. So going to page 8 now, we've got another little Likert scale. So how are you doing keeping your body in shape? Keeping your mind in shape? Well, you're all keeping your mind in shape because you're here for continuing education. So you're all doing really well there. And keeping your soul in shape. Okay, so you're all on board and self-aware with those aspects, because it is this constructive group sharing about how to cope with difficult situations that actually creates increased resilience to reduce some of the harmful effects of stress, compassion fatigue, burnout, and vicarious trauma. So constructive group sharing has been found to be perhaps one of the most resilience building things that we can engage in. So then we have the transformational strategies. So to overcome the erosion of optimism and the meaningfulness, you know, that deep cynicism that sometimes takes root for people who are really traumatized. So to overcome that, there is a lot of things that we can do. Create community, practice gratitude, cultivate optimism, avoid overthinking. That's a very important thing, because overthinking will embed cynicism and it will create depression. So increasing social connectedness, practicing forgiveness, and practicing mindfulness and meditation. So I've got those on the last few pages of your workbook. And so here it is. We're 8 minutes before noon. So finding meaning in work and life, and so focusing on the positive outcomes that can emerge, such as growth, strength, hope, and the constructive group sharing that we're engaging in right now. So, were there any question or points of discussion that people want to bring forward?
Any questions? I mean, you don't have to ask in front of everybody, but
Yeah.
we're not up to sharing that one yet.
Yeah.
Okay, well, thank you very much, Susan. One of the things that struck me in going through the Lawyers Association of BC is the further along you get in your career, the greater chance you're going to be experiencing this. The Velcro thing does work. So the best thing to do is if you're did this and you're starting to realize some things, talk to somebody at work if you have somebody that you can talk to figure out what's going on. If you don't want to talk to somebody at work, a lot of us work for larger organizations who have employee assistance programs. And they're there to help you in this. From talking to people, it's better to talk to a peer. They know where you're going, but there's always employee assistance program. If there's not, CSAP, we talked about being able to, if you don't have an employee assistance program, we talked within CSAP of setting up something. We don't have it done yet because we don't know what the need would be or what the response would be. But my email address is there, my personal email address, so it doesn't go to work, and my cell phone there is if you just need to talk to somebody about this. I've been doing this a long time. I've seen a lot of things where people didn't talk and they went a little bit bad. And there's no need of that happening. There's enough people here. I know we all work at different firms, we're competitors, but we have a lot more in common that we have that's different. So we should talk to one another. And if it's a financial concern and somebody wants to see a counselor, let me know and I'll pay the bill. And from an overall perspective, and I'm serious about that. I mean, I'm very fortunate in life, and it won't matter. We need to be able to find a way to ratchet down some of our own internal stresses we're putting on one another. With the audit or the performance assessment, we need to make it more of a training exercise than not being a training exercise. I'm in the middle of one now, and I'm doing the performance assessment, and I hate it. I don't like finding mistakes. I know the person did their best. and there were some things to do. Work better with the MOE to figure out the process. How can we do it better? How can we make their jobs easier as well? Because I'm sure they're having people, from what I'm hearing, yelling at them from calling in on projects and offsite migration. And the final thing we need to do is we need to celebrate a little bit better what we're doing. I mean, if we weren't here, how many brownfields would there be? I mean, how many sites have been remediated? 1. 2, how many people are able to live downtown close to where they work so they can have an extra 2 hours a day with their families? How many people are healthier because they aren't exposed to low levels of contaminants over long periods of time? And I think we lose that about what we're actually doing for society when we're just into the nitty-gritty of looking at micrograms per liter, parts per billion. Right? There is a net positive. If you're talking to people in other jurisdictions who don't have a society like ours, stuff is laying vacant for a long, long, long period of time. They can't get closure on us. And there is tons and tons of condos. I think if we've talked about adding it up, but I'd say since we've started 9 years ago, there's probably 30,000 residences built on sites which were contaminated before. There's probably hundreds of thousands of square feet of industrial and commercial land, tens of thousands of people employed. And I think we need to pat ourselves in the back on that and not get mired down in the day-to-day.